Hello guys, and welcome to another Brief Tune video. Today we will go through the spectacular Spider-Man, but before we start, you should know that this video might contain some spoilers. Now, we all know who Spider-Man is. He's an American superhero who was first published in Marvel comic books. As a result of commercial success, this character got many versions later on, and today's version is the spectacular Spider-Man. In this, Spider-Man's secret identity, Peter Benjamin Parker, is our protagonist. Initially, Peter is depicted as a teenage high school student and an orphan raised by his Aunt May and Uncle Ben in New York City after his parents Richard and Mary Parker died a long time ago. He struggles with adolescence, financial issues, and even bullying. However, he has many supporting friends such as Flash Thompson, J. Jonah Jameson, Harry Osborn, Gwen Stacy, Mary Jane Watson, Liz, and the Black Cat. And like any good protagonist, Peter has antagonists such as Dr. Octopus, Kraven the Hunter, and most importantly, the Green Goblin and Venom. Now let's get to some background. Our protagonist Peter has a normal childhood with his parents. However, when he was 6, and for his safety, his parents, Richard, who was a brilliant scientist, and Mary Parker, who was a skilled spy and translator at the time, left him with his Aunt May and Uncle Ben, then supposedly being killed in an airplane accident in Algeria. Before the crash, Richard, along with his friend Eddie Brock, father of Peter's childhood friend Eddie Brock Jr., was working together on a symbiote. In the spectacular Spider-Man, they are childhood friends, and when their parents tragically died in a plane crash, and although Eddie grew up without the same support system as Peter, he demonstrated his protective nature towards him and protected him from bullies in high school. However, Eddie was still jealous of Peter because, even though both lost their parents, Peter had his relatives while Eddie had no one to look after him. Following the deaths of his brother Richard and sister-in-law Mary, Ben and May took in their young nephew Peter into their Forest Hills home where he grew up with a great interest in science and academics, causing him to be a nerd. And as a result, Peter was bullied by Flash, who was once his childhood best friend. But Peter still made two new best friends, Gwen Stacy and Harry Osborn. Towards the end of his sophomore year, Peter's class took a field trip to Dr. Connor's lab at the Empire State University, and it's there where he gets his superhuman spider powers after being bitten by a radioactive spider. These include superhuman strength, agility, reflexes, stamina, durability, coordination, balance, clinging to surfaces and ceilings like a spider, and detecting danger with his precognition ability called spider sense. He builds wrist-mounted web shooter devices that shoot artificial spider webs of his design, which he uses both for fighting and for web swinging across the city. Now, while Uncle Ben was dead throughout the whole series, he still helped Peter. So, years later, as Peter learned that the alien symbiote was making him more aggressive, he went to a church and attempted to use the bell in the tower to remove it from his body. However, the symbiote fought back and encased Peter in a cocoon. Inside his mind, Peter relived his memories where he interacted with Uncle Ben. As Ben woke Peter up, Peter was shocked and happy to see him, unaware that these were just memories. He attempted to spend time with Ben, however, Ben realized that Peter was late for school and sent him on his way. In the same memories, Peter told Uncle Ben he was studying at the library, but he actually entered in a wrestling match under the ring name of Spider-Man for a prize of 1,000 cash. Though he quickly beats the champion, Crusher Hogan, the manager, Sullivan Edwards, denied his prize money unless he signs to a contract. Angry about this condition, Peter let a burglar get away with Edwards' vault money, telling Edwards it's not his problem. Peter ended up walking home as Uncle Ben seemingly never came to give him a ride. But upon arriving home, Peter learned the awful truth from his heartbroken aunt that a burglar had killed Ben for his car. Spider-Man then tracked the burglar to a warehouse and held him out of the 4th-story window of the warehouse. As light shined on the burglar's face, Spider-Man saw that it was the same thief who he had let escape earlier at the wrestling arena. Spider-Man confronted the burglar and then dropped him out of the window. However, he still caught caught him with a web line, spared his life, and left him for the cops to collect. With Ben saying, "With great power comes great responsibility," he reminded Peter that capturing the burglar was only the beginning and showed him other memories of times he saved others, so he began to use his powers to fight crime by becoming Spider-Man. Sometimes Peter couldn't bear the heavy responsibility and thought many times of taking the gene cleanser, but his uncle's words kept altering his mind. As for his love interests, Peter and Gwen fall in love by the end of the show, but can't date to spare Harry Osborn further pain after his dad died. Now, let's get to the characters briefly. Aunt May. May is the widow of Ben Parker and the paternal aunt by marriage of Peter Parker. May fell in love with and eventually married Ben Parker, and they both agreed to stay child-free. After the death of Peter's parents, Richard and Mary, they took in Peter to raise him. Aunt May introduced Peter to Mary Jane Watson, the niece of her friend Anna Watson, and they tried to set the two up together. She also gave Peter relationship advice when he was deciding between Gwen Stacy and Liz Allen, and has been a great support overall. Benjamin Franklin, Ben Parker. Ben Parker is the deceased uncle of Peter Parker. Following the deaths of his brother Richard and sister-in-law Mary, Ben and May took in their young nephew Peter into their Forest Hills home. One night, a burglar entered their home and killed Ben. Peter came by later and learned of his uncle's murder. Not long after Peter got his spider powers, Ben taught Peter that with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And then Peter began to use his powers to help others as Spider-Man. Gwen. Gwen Stacy is Peter Parker's classmate and best friend, as well as the daughter of Captain George Stacy of the New York Police Department. Gwen and Peter work as interns at Dr. Kurt Connor's laboratory, along with their friend Eddie Brock Jr., and she's been in love with him since middle school. Despite her feelings, Peter remains oblivious to her affection due to their friendship and his superficial taste in women, but they still have an interesting relationship. Edward Brock. Eddie Brock, a student and lab assistant at Empire State University, becomes Peter Parker's childhood friend. However, Eddie grows jealous of Peter's support system and resents him for not being there for him, Gwen Stacy, and Mary Jane Watson. When the alien symbiote is stolen and bonds with Peter, Eddie's life takes a downward turn. He becomes Venom and seeks revenge on Peter, targeting his loved ones. Harold Osborn. Harry Osborn, the son of Norman Osborn, is Peter Parker's best friend at Midtown High School. Despite being a target for bullying, Harry struggles with his father's neglect and criticism. In his quest to prove himself, Harry discovers the globulin green formula at Oscorp Laboratories, which enhances his physical abilities, but also affects his sanity. Under the influence of the formula, Harry distances himself from his true friends and becomes the Green Goblin, seeking to dismantle Oscorp's illegal activities alongside the big man. As Peter Parker's junior year of high school begins, he's bullied by Flash for asking Sally Averill out. Then he and Gwen join Eddie at ESU Lab as interns. Peter takes a job as a photographer at a newspaper to help Aunt May pay the bills, while as Spider-Man, he must stop the Vulture from exacting revenge on Norman Osborn for stealing his inventions and defeat the enforcers who have been hired by the big man of crime to eliminate Spider-Man. In the end, Vulture gets captured by Spider-Man and Aunt May gives Peter a curfew. Peter reluctantly attempts to tutor Liz Allen while she seems disinterested because she thinks he's a nerd. While as Spider-Man, he must stop Max Dillon, who, following an accident at the ESU labs, has become Electro. Desperate to get his life back because he couldn't do basic things, he causes chaos in the city and is forced to either go back to the hospital or jail. Electro threatens Dr. Kurt Connors to restore him back to normal and destroys the lab, but in the end, Spider-Man defeats him. Peter is trying to hide his identity from his schoolmates while Dr. Connors is injecting his veins with an experimental bioformula, genetically altered lizard DNA to get his hand back, and now is slowly turning into a lizard. This makes Peter and Spider-Man learn to face hard choices after Connors fully transforms and puts all of his loved ones in danger. Spider-Man takes an antibiotic and follows Dr. Connors to the zoo, and they turn him back to normal. In the news, Peter was credited for taking pictures of Spider-Man, which makes everyone disappointed in him because he chose a contest and to take advantage of his friend's pain instead of helping Dr. Connors. So he ends up getting fired. After winning the contest that Peter joined to help Aunt May pay the bills, he heads to the newspaper to get his paycheck and he flirts with Betty. J. Jonah Jameson's secretary, well at it. He also struggles to keep the promises he makes to his friends because of his heroism responsibilities. While on a date with Betty, Montana, one of the enforcers, becomes the shocker to fulfill his contract with the big man, eliminating Spider-Man. But as usual, Spider-Man defeats him. At the same time, Harry is under his father's pressure to become a better person. Big Man recruits the 2 burglars Peter puts in prison and turns one of them, Flint Marko, who becomes the supervillain Sandman after an experiment he funded was run by Norman Osborn and Otto Octavius. Sandman attacks Spider-Man, they get into a fight, but Spider-Man freezes Sandman using a concrete mixer. Also, Peter and his best friend Harry Osborn try out for the school's football team, and they surprisingly do well and get positions in it. But when Peter got a better position, Harry gets jealous, so Peter gives a bad performance in the actual game to uplift Harry. As Peter struggles to get a date for Midtown High's fall formal, Alex O'Hearn, Marco's former partner in crime, becomes the big man's latest creation, the Rhino, and seeks revenge on Spider-Man for putting him behind bars. They have a big fight in the city, and Spider-Man defeats him. Spider-Man also discovers the big man's identity, Tombstone, but is unable to do anything about it due to his public persona of philanthropist L. Thompson Lincoln. In the end, with Aunt May's help, Mary becomes Peter's date for the night. When Mary Jane arrives, Peter is surprised to find her stunning. They attend the fall formal together, causing various reactions among their classmates, who, while enjoying the party, a mysterious new villain called the Green Goblin aims to replace Tombstone as the big man of crime and destroy Spider-Man. Spider-Man and the new villain destroy the place as they fight, and Spider-Man ends up winning. The episode ends with Osborn drinking something from a tube while hiding, and Peter having one last dance of the night. Peter gets his hopes down when Mary reduces their friendship to just being friends, while Harry ignores Gwen's help after she saw him struggle with some health complications. And while everyone is in the amusement park enjoying their time, Peter and Spider-Man learn that their actions have consequences when Otto Octavius becomes the supervillain Dr. Octopus following a lab accident caused by the Green Goblin. They must prevent Doc Ock from obtaining an experimental battery pack that can keep his mechanical arms functioning indefinitely. Even with his new power, Otto loses the fight, and the big man doubts that Osborn is behind everything. Oh, and Liz and Flash break up. On Halloween night, while Colonel John Jameson struggles to land his damaged space shuttle, and he finally makes it, Gwen discovers why Harry is behaving strangely and warns him, but once again, he ignores her. Spider-Man has his final battle with the Green Goblin, who has kidnapped Tombstone's second-in-command Hammerhead to force the former to surrender to him. Peter faces his biggest challenge yet when he discovers the Goblin's true identity. So it turns out that Harry, Peter's best friend, is the Green freaking Goblin who's stealing the experimental potions from his father's lab to become stronger and win his favor. Norman Osborn asks Spider-Man for help to save his one and only son, and he agrees under the condition of sending Harry off somewhere far away. The episode ends with an anonymous black creature that John Jameson found on the glass of the space shuttle. News about the black creature spread, and Peter's excited to see it. However, Dr. Martha Connors doesn't trust him. So as Spider-Man, and while breaking into the lab at night, he encounters Master Thief Black Cat while attempting to steal that alien symbiote that was taken to ESU for analysis. The symbiote ends up bonding with Spider-Man, granting him a new sleek black suit with enhanced abilities, so he decides that it would be better if he kept it. Meanwhile, the Chameleon, a master of disguise, impersonates Spider-Man during a crime spree. Spider-Man became public enemy number 1, but ironically, Flash was the one who still had faith in him. So now, the real Spider-Man is forced to join forces with Black Cat to stop him. The two head to the boat where Mayor Waters is hosting a party. Spider-Man then fights his doppelganger who stole the guest's diamonds, saves the day, and wins everyone's favor back. In the end, Peter shares a passionate kiss with the one who stole the diamonds from the imposter, Black Cat. With Electro's help, Dr. Octopus breaks himself, Vulture, Shocker, Sandman, and Rhino out of Rikers Island prison to quench their mutual revenge on Spider-Man. At the same time, Peter apologizes for what he previously did when Dr. Connor transformed into a lizard, but Eddie refuses his apology and calls him selfish. The Sinister Six attack Spider-Man, and even with his new black suit, he finds that his old enemies together are more than he can handle. So he gets away from them, and when he goes back home, he sleeps after ignoring Mr. Jameson's calls, thinking that he would scold him about not bringing in new pictures. But in fact, he was calling him to let him know that Aunt May got injured. The Sinister Six lure Spider-Man to Central Park, and this time he outsmarts them and uses their powers against each other to beat them. Upon seeing who took the newspaper's pictures, Peter realizes that the costume was controlling him and not the other way around. And as he was standing on the door, Mary Jane drops the news about his Aunt May, leaving him in shock. Now, with Aunt May in the hospital, his friendship with not only Eddie Brock is ruined, but with his high school friends too. Flash, his bully, calls him out for his ungratefulness, and that's how Peter finally gains enough self-awareness to realize the symbiote is negatively affecting his personality and decides that it's about damn time he takes it off. However, the struggle between Peter and the symbiote evolves into a war within Peter's own mind, where he remembers memories from the past. Peter is aided by his late Uncle Ben, who reminds him that, "With great power comes great responsibility," and manages to get rid of the symbiote, freezes it in the lab, and destroys Eddie's chance of getting his job back. The alien is alive though, and takes over Eddie's mind, exposes Spider-Man's identity, and convinces him that he's the reason of all of his struggles. After coming back to his senses, Peter makes up with his friends and learns that Mary Jane is now dating Eddie. As Aunt May is released from the hospital, Peter is home doubting whether he should let go of being Spider-Man, but as he's doing so, Eddie Brock, who is now transformed into the vicious Venom, after bonding with the symbiote, attacks him. He also seeks revenge on Peter by targeting his loved ones, including May and Gwen Stacy, and draws him into motion to defeat him. To win against it, Spider-Man pretends to accept the symbiote again, and because he's stronger, the symbiote drops Eddie. However, Spider-Man catches the alien and sinks it into cement, getting him once and for all. In the end, Peter accepts his responsibility, and Gwen kisses him. Wanting to clear things out with Gwen, Peter suddenly gets Liz's attention. As Spider-Man, he must face a new supervillain, the self-proclaimed sorcerer Mysterio. After a long confrontation where Spider-Man wins, Mysterio is ultimately unmasked as Quentin Beck, a special effects expert and former henchman of the Chameleon. Though, unbeknownst to Spider-Man, Beck is only following the instructions of a criminal mastermind known as the Master Planner. But yeah, anyways, he gets arrested. In the end, Osborn helps Peter get his job back in the ESU lab, and it turns out that the Mysterio Peter arrested is a Fae. While Peter is conflicted over his choice to be with either Gwen or Liz, Kraven the Hunter comes to New York in search of his ultimate prey, Spider-Man. After being defeated during their first battle, Kraven enlists Professor Miles Warren's help to even the odds by transforming him into the Ultimate Hunter. Of course, with unforeseen consequences. After transforming, Kraven chases Spider-Man and they fight brutally all over the town, but Kraven disappears after getting beaten again. Right after that, Peter joins Liz in the hospital to comfort her because Flash was in surgery after getting his leg broken at a football game. It's almost Christmas Day, Peter's getting less attention from Liz because of Flash's injury, and his wandering eye prevents him from being with Gwen. At the same time, the Master Planner reconstitutes the Sinister Six, without Dr. Octopus, but with Vulture, Electro, Sandman, Rhino, and new members Mysterio and Kraven to destroy Spider-Man once and for all. The villains attack Peter as he was ice skating with his friends, and they totally destroy the place, but he fights them one by one and triumphs as usual. Who saw that coming? On New Year's Eve, the Master Planner and the new Sinister Six kidnap Gwen to coerce her father, Police Captain George Stacy, into giving them high-level clearance, allowing the Planner to effectively run the world. Spider-Man, determined to foil the Planner's scheme, takes the fight to his secret lair, where he discovers the villain's true identity and must rescue Gwen. After a long fight and a big explosion, Spider-Man manages to save Gwen and earns George Stacy's respect, as well as earning himself a girlfriend, because Liz broke up with Flash indefinitely. Now that Peter and Liz are official, Mark, who is Liz's brother, brother gets out of juvenile, Harry returns from Europe and asks Gwen out, and everyone is invited to Flash Thompson's birthday party, except for Peter, who unexpectedly reveals to be invited. As for Spider-Man, he must face the Sandman once again, who is attempting to pull off his big score by robbing an oil tanker. It's safe to say the Sandman failed miserably. Peter also begins to fear the possibility of Venom returning, and to make sure he really got rid of it, he goes to the construction site where he buried the symbiote and unintentionally leads Eddie to it. While Peter's friends are busy with the theater club, Eddie Brock rebonds with the Venom symbiote and frames Spider-Man for a crime spree to ruin his rep. He also uses John Jameson, who's been infected by microscopic spores from the alien symbiote that led to increasing his size and strength. J. Jonah Jameson encourages his son to become a superhero, but because of Venom's actions, John comes to see Spider-Man as a menace and becomes determined to destroy him. During the fight, Spider-Man electrifies John, which makes him lose his power as well as his mind. By the end, Venom exposes Spider-Man's identity to everyone who is in Jameson's office. Peter's secret identity as Spider-Man has been outed by Venom, and Mr. Jonah Jameson plans to expose him despite Peter denying. This leaves him and his loved ones vulnerable to the public and his enemies. And to add fuel to the fire, the reporter Ned interviews Peter's acquaintances and Spider-Man's villains to determine whether the two truly could be one. Oh, and Eddie also gets his job back at the ESU lab. As Spider-Man, he has his final battle with Venom at school. He uses a gene cleanser to separate Eddie from the symbiote, and Eddie is sent to Ravencroft, where he becomes insane. In the end, and due to safety reasons, Mr. Miles Warren takes the lab's management from Dr. Connors, and the press claims that Spider-Man's identity was just a rumor. Liz and Peter are planning to go on a date, while a gang war looms as Silver Sable, Hammerhead, and Dr. Octopus vie for a prize that could change the balance of power in the New York underworld. As Spider-Man finds himself in the thick of this fray after helping Mr. Foswell, he must rely on the unexpected help of Rhino, who wants to destroy the Drive because he doesn't want competition with Hammerhead. The two fight side by side, but then turn against each other. Spider-Man, of course, wins, and the cops catch Rhino while Hammerhead runs away. Then it turns out that Norman Osborn was the one who planned everything, and that the real Drive was in his possession. Of course, let's not also forget that our brave hero is late for his date. As always, Peter winds up on a Midtown High police car ride with his ex-crush Sally Averill, who has an intense dislike for him. As Spider-Man, he must once again face off against the Enforcers, Shocker, Fancy Dan, and the Ox, who have been enhanced with new equipment by the Tinkerer at Tombstone's request. He confronts them, and as they were getting away in a van, he catches them and gets them arrested. The police officer George Stacy implies that he discovered his real identity, Sally slowly warms up to him, and the school loses the Mustang Championship title due to Harry being reported for using substances. On Valentine's Day, Peter and his friends are in a romantic party with their dates, and Liz and her brother Mark notice how Peter looks at Gwen. On the other hand, Tombstone, Dr. Octopus, and Silvermane call a Valentine's Day summit. But when Hammerhead betrays them all in an attempt to become the new big man, the summit erupts into a gang war that only Spider-Man can stop before it escalates further. So, a fight takes place, and because there are too many witnesses, Tombstone pretends to be on Spider-Man's side and beats his mates to save his reputation. Then him and Spider-Man fight as well, and the big man loses against the hero, of course. As for Peter, he jeopardizes his relationship with Liz. Now, determined to be a better boyfriend to Liz, Peter attempts to help her brother Mark as Spider-Man. But when Mark relapses into his gambling addiction and ends up in debt, the Green Goblin, now the big man of crime, transforms Mark into the Molten Man and blackmails him into fighting Spider-Man. Liz and Mary Jane also get caught in the crossfire after they went to look for Mark in a casino building, but Spider-Man saves them after he puts Mark's fire out and sends him back to juvie. Having the leading role in the school's play, Harry is nowhere to be found while Spider-Man volunteers to test the new security system of a prison called the Vault. When the Green Goblin hacks the system and releases all of the inmates, Spider-Man finds himself hunted by some of his greatest enemies and must work with Black Cat and her imprisoned father Walter Hardy to contain them. In the process, Spider-Man faces a shocking revelation about Uncle Ben's death. Turns out, Black Cat is the same burglar who killed Uncle Ben, but it's not the time to confront his uncle's killer because he must escape the prison first. To save them, Walter decides to not run away and turn on the sleeping gas instead as a form of repentance, which leaves his daughter in disbelief. Now she holds a grudge against Spider-Man because she thinks he influenced her dad. Harry decides to confess that he's the Green Goblin to his friends and that he hallucinates about kidnapping himself. After pretending to leave and while eavesdropping, Harry hears Peter and Gwen confess their feelings to each other. Now that Spider-Man is suspicious of the father and the son, he confronts them and they deny everything. Then the Green Goblin appears out of nowhere and attacks Spider-Man, leaving the two guilt-free. After a long fight, the Goblin's mask falls off, revealing that Norman Osborn is actually the Goblin who gained power through strengthening gas instead of injections. He also went as far as to frame his own son and break his leg to distract Spider-Man. He also claimed he did everything to create a man out of Harry and that he's never been prouder of him. Aww. In this final battle, wide-ranging consequences come up for Harry, who loses his father, and for Peter, who breaks up with Liz to finally be with Gwen, but the latter struggles to end her relationship with Harry, who, despite knowing they're in love with each other, holds on to her. In the final scenes, Dr. Connor's family is flying to Florida for a new life, then familiar-looking men shows up. Now, despite the big success of the show, and although a total of 5 seasons consisting of 65 episodes was initially intended in addition to various films connecting each season, the series was canceled before production could begin on the planned 3rd season due to legal problems between the producing companies, leaving all of us on a cliffhanger. But that means that's it for today. Please don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you guys in another video.